Hey everyone, welcome to our first webinar of 2026. And I'm so excited to have Kim Snyder, director and producer, and Janique Robillard, producer of the amazing film The Librarians. So I'm just going to start off saying that I fell in love with this film at Sundance. I was lucky enough to see the world premiere and I was tearing up at the end. So, and almost crying. I mean, I'm not a big crier, but almost crying, although people around me were crying. And I
Including
kind of knew
us.
what?
Including us.
Yes, yes, okay. And I just knew at that point I wanted to get involved in the film. And so I figured out a way to stalk Janique and Kim over the next couple of months. I tracked them down at Sundance and then, they said, well, just be in touch. And so I think I was in touch every 2 to 3 weeks.
Then there was
Um,
that party in LA. I remember that
yes.
part. There was a party in LA.
Okay, yes. So I just stalked wherever I could, basically. And so I'm really excited. I'm very excited that I think it started. I'm just giving the introduction here that um, they were like going, okay, John, well, maybe. And then I sold myself as a consultant in helping them figure out their strategy. And so we did that for a couple of months and then eventually figured out this path. But what I think we'll start, maybe we'll start with showing the trailer, just so that everyone kind of whoever isn't familiar with the film. And it's already, hang on a second. Okay. So I never do this in webinars because I'm very suspicious about this, but I am going to try and show you the trailer. Sure. Okay.
I'm doing a criminal investigation into some of your staff. Essentially, the librarians are my suspects.
Have you a real love of people, books, and learning? You may well consider the vocation of a librarian.
It didn't dawn on us that we would come under attack.
The word I have on my heart is repentance. We have librarians who are misunderstanding what is healthy and good for children.
When I was first attacked, a student's mother was calling me a pornographer, pedophile, and groomer of children.
Do not interrupt my time.
That was my office. These are two books that I was asked to be removed, and I would not remove them.
We're going to pull books off the shelves, stamp, color purple.
Yep, there's your nudity right there.
Get rid of them. Get rid of them.
This book was banned.
I would like to know how the history of the KKK is pornographic.
We have a movement within America that has decided that school boards are now where they want to push their agenda.
This stuff is coming into your schools, and it's probably already there.
Part of the ethics of our profession to support the First Amendment and fight censorship.
I've had former students reach out to me that have told me books have saved them. I'm going to speak out about it.
This is not a communist nation. You do not get to pick our reading material. It is ours.
You're trying to arrest librarians.
I do not understand.
You're a fascist. You're a fascist.
I cannot imagine my face on the wanted poster and my friends being taken away in handcuffs.
You're coming for teachers and librarians, and they know it.
This is a spiritual war.
Our goal is to spread this into other communities.
This is about taking away rights.
I'm here today to implore you to listen to librarians.
What is going
Nope. I was letting someone in. I so apologize. And I closed the window. Okay, this is why I don't do this. Yeah, so here, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. So apologize for cutting that off at the end. and that's what I get for doing administrative tasks during the webinar. But while I was watching that, I also remembered why I wanted to get involved, because this film so speaks to our moment now that we're living through in our society, and very brave people who are standing up for our rights. So anyway, so this brings me to kind of like a little bit of history of this film. And so why were you guys drawn to this story? Like, why this film?
Well, on my part, let's see. My last film, Us Kids, which premiered at Sundance back in 2020, if everybody remembers, only 3 short weeks later is when we all hunkered down for a long time with COVID. And I was throwing a lot at the wall. COVID definitely, we were very happy to have our premiere get out in time, but it did hamper a lot of our distribution. And I tell that because it also was a moment where it was a lot of thinking about distribution in that time of there were a lot of frustrations for everybody, I think, in our space about how films were getting out. And then, of course, the theatrical was killed. So we had a lot of fallout with festivals, with theatrical, and I had a couple of projects I was developing. And I always say projects come to me often like romance, in that there's just this unexplainable attraction sometimes where it's like ding, ding. And I've learned over time to it's instinct, and to sort of, when it's really strong, trust it. So I'd seen a story about what was known as the Krauss list, about this list of 850 books in the fall of 21. That was so that was a whole I guess year and a half after the release at Sundance of the last film, and just trying to figure out what was next. And it was a list of 850 books that the governor was asking, or a state representative, named Krauss, was asking librarians um, to review and to remove from their shelves. And I learned about this amazing group of librarians calling themselves the Freedom Fighters in Texas that were starting to react and organize. And I jumped on it immediately, got in touch with them, and asked if we could come down and explore developing this project. That was in the fall of 21. And as these things go, I should know better after. I don't think any of my films have taken me certainly not less than 3 years to make. But you don't want to remember that you're in for that. But I was lucky enough to team up with Janique, who had been working on the sort of tail end of Us Kids, and told her about it. Our other producers, Maria and Jana, everybody sort of got in at the very beginning, and as well as some of our amazing executive producers. And we formed a posse and set out to start to chronicle. And then it unraveled into a national story well beyond Texas.
Right. So can you give like just a very brief history of the festival, and kind of your festival history, and kind of a little bit of the sales landscape and thinking about distribution that you spoke about earlier?
Well, that's always a hard thing in the beginning. The festival strategy, we had Sundance.
Mm-hmm.
We were selected. We knew we got into South by and Full Frame. For me, that's like a real trifecta. With I think Miami slammed in there, which was really important because our story also had such presence in both Texas and Miami and Florida were going to be important. So we also knew pretty early about Dallas. And that was a great sort of beginning. But I think the big question there is, do you want to be more precious about the festivals, or to go wide? And I think we decided to go wide. We started working with Film Collaborative.
Right.
And in the end, they said, look, we think this is going to, be a festival, strong festival title. And I think at this point we've screened at well over 100 film festivals worldwide.
With like 26 awards, Best of Doc Jury Awards, Audience Awards, etc. Yes.
Yes, and one of the important early awards was in Dallas. We won Best Film, I think Best Feature. It wasn't just Best Doc at the Dallas Film Festival. And that has bearing on our, like, where I feel like our impact campaign really started to, like, it happened early. I mean, we were thinking about it early. And that was true because, well, I'll jump ahead in the story a little bit, if I'm not throwing you out of your
No, it's
order
fine.
there. And, that was where we had a lot of our Texas subjects. Well, you can tell that part of the story about what happened in Dallas.
Yeah, so the Dallas International Film Festival was in April, and that's a really important period because in Texas and a number of other states, there's school board and other library board, hyper local elections that take place. So like Kim was saying, that decision to go wide versus being precious with the film festivals was really intertwined with our desire to make an impact with the film. And so we landed in Dallas in April. It was days before the May voting deadline for some very important districts, school districts in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And our film participants, Audrey, one of our librarians, Lainey Hawes, who's co-founder Texas Freedom to Read Project, Chris Tackett, and others were able to come to the theater. Adrian from Granbury, and really encourage folks to show up for their school board race, that there were days left, that this was a very important one. And we had, that was at the Texas Theater, like 600 seats theater, sold out
twice
crowd, 2 screenings, so 2 days in a row to make that impression on audience members of the importance of school boards. And we saw a lot of those seats that had been taken by Patriot Mobile ultra conservative candidates in the years before. So that was kind of the first,
yeah, we really feel that we can claim
evidence that this was the right game plan.
Yeah, we really felt that we could claim some serious effect. It was Lainey got up and said, look, it's 48 hours until these school boards around Dallas. I need every single one of you. She said there's like a average of a 6% turnout in school board races. You've got to show up. And, we don't, can we prove beyond a doubt that we helped flip those school boards or help pro book people in? But we're pretty sure we had a lot of press.
Yeah, I think
outside
the
of it.
press does a lot too around those moments and winning that award. We had radio, we had print, we had all the social media leading up to that. So the word was very much out that there was this conversation about school board takeovers and the fight for freedom to read, which was a pivotal issue in those school board races.
And also, John, the decision to go kind of wide wasn't just pertaining to festivals. I think we had early conversations to know that we were in a historical moment around a particular issue in this country that was escalating quickly. And we felt, without sounding, I'll be transparent, after Sundance, you always get a lot of advice from publicists and from different people about the awards trajectory and what's prudent. And we kind of just decided we need to put first getting this out to people and the impact of it. And with the theatrical, we need to put that first, sometimes counter to what some people advise in terms of awards strategy. But we felt, let's just do the impact and the other will come or not. And let's not worry about it. Let's just get it where it needs to be and make impact.
Which kind of brings me to, I think you've already answered what the goal of the release was, because that's always one of my primary questions. Like what was the most important thing for you both in terms of the release of this film as far as what you were striving for? And it seems like impact was the main goal. Would you say that's between money, career, change the world, audience, which are my 4 main goals. And I think it's probably the first question I asked you when I met you, and we first started talking. And so I think it's pretty clear that impact, and change the world was part of your goal or your main primary goal.
I think it was part of our main primary goal. We all want to be recognized, with awards, and we did end up getting 26 of them. So that was great. But I think the part that surprised me, I always thought we could have a lot of impact, but we worked really hard to do it. Um, I think what surprised us was the Field of Dreams. I don't know if we're there yet with the theatrical, the Field of Dreams aspect of it.
Well, we can wait a little bit on that,
Okay.
maybe. So
Yeah.
one of the things, this is like a pre-audience question from Natalie Brown. What were some of the calculations that you made about distribution before the film was finished, and how did they shift over time?
Good question. Again, choosing Jon, I'll just give him his own um, being going independent. I think it was something we talked about earlier from past experience with other films, which were not necessarily analogous. But I felt like there have been other times in my career where I've been, stayed the course with less risk and, do the prudent thing and wait, but you can be waiting for Godot a lot of times with these films. And I'd heard a lot about, I'm just going to praise Jon here. I'd heard a lot about Jon and, how he was thinking about a lot of alternative distribution. And so this time I felt I want to do it. I want to do it with someone who has been thinking a lot about that in a smart way. So yeah, I think we made those decisions pretty early to kind of retain control in some ways. And also being an ITVS project, I think a lot of people on this will know that you're no longer a candidate to go to Sundance and sell world rights to Netflix because you've already committed to a North American broadcast with ITVS, and you still have to sort of wait to see if one of the strands is going to take you. And we were lucky that, Lois, at whatever point that was, said, we're going to broadcast. So the broadcast was the end of the train. And then it's like filling in where to get from. And with the festival, just to go back, we also made a really strategic decision. The big question was, would this translate internationally? Was this going to be seen as just a wholly American myopic, because I'd done gun violence movies, which was more of that crazy America and their horrible gun problem. Although sadly, as of last night, I mean, that's transcending borders every day. So sad, with the tragedy in BC. But I think having had that experience, I didn't know if this story would be seen as American. And so to say that Sheffield premiere, we premiered internationally at the Sheffield Film Festival, that was really important moment because it reframed our film in the press. We got a lot of press in The Guardian, and all over the UK. That started to have a European whole global import, and I'm probably jumping the gun, but in the festival strategy, framing this as an international story that resounded outside of our borders was proven in June in Sheffield.
Right. Yeah. So some of the, kind of like obviously it was broadcast on Independent Lens 2 nights ago on the 9th. But in terms of the theatrical, you guys want to talk about, we can both talk about the results from the theatrical, which is, it's one of the standout documentary releases over the last couple of years, which we're very proud to have been a part of. And my booker, Cindy Bannock, has been a huge part of that, obviously, and your team has been a huge part. But I think we're in over 160 theaters in the United States, North America so far, plus a limited release in Canada. And I think the box office to date is 285, but it's climbing. I think we'll break 300 within the next couple of weeks. But the most important thing to me about the release has been how these screenings have turned into town halls. And I'm wondering if you guys can talk a little bit about that. I mean, that's kind of central to like what we do and what we try to do, but it really exploded with your film.
Mm. Well, I'm going to just say again that, one of the things I appreciate about you, John, is, some people will kind of, and not sell you a bill of goods, but like kind of get you very excited about the potential. And I think I appreciated your prudence in kind of saying, just keep your expectations moderate. The way these things go, it's great that the film forum had reached out and wanted us, so that's always a great start. With a 2-week committed run, and you from that, you had said you'll probably get Lemley, but it isn't the old days. You're not going to get 1-week runs, and and I kept saying, "Are you sure that?" I had this Field of Dreams, like build it, and they were like, "You sure that we can't imagine this film going throughout the country and the heartland?" And you were like, "Well, who knows?" And you did make me repeat out loud on the conference call, just let me know that you understand that, all that we know for sure is that you're going to have a 2-week run, and what I just said, a 2-week run at Film Forum, and maybe a week in Lemley, I think you said. And there are very few times in my life where something like totally exceeded with, 150 to 200 theaters, and this kind of, I just keep using that Field of Dreams analogy because it wasn't just the amount of theaters, it was selling out. Like we kept, I'm still amazed. Like we would show up in Toronto and all over the place, and people would be lined up 40 minutes before around the block.
And selling out sometimes weeks in advance, like five weeks in advance, 4 weeks in advance, which was always shocking to me because I've never bought a ticket to a movie 5 weeks in advance. And then we started seeing that kind of across the country. And we can obviously talk about,
and in the reddest places of America, small art house theaters that were calling us back. I'll get to the town hall part, but the other thing was that that I really appreciated about your team, John, Cindy, and you, was that I pushed in the beginning and said, because I was coming out of a maybe decade ago understanding, and I said, why can't you just try to book it for a week? And I think it was very prudent to say, we'd really rather book this for one-offs and see. I'd rather have a strong showing for one night. And I think that's helpful for people to know, because that strategy totally worked, where we had this proof of full theaters, and then they would end up extending it for 4 nights, or as opposed to upfront. One of our executive producers, Penny, who's amazing, 4 hours for an 11:30 in the morning screening. We do have so many examples that are wonderful brags about people who, librarians in particular, who would drive 4 hours or say, "This is my 3rd time." So they were like, amazing to us, because we had this very important screening at the American Librarian Association also in June. And then the word got out to really like librarians across the country. And that really helped, because they would tell people, and so on, as they say. But yeah, Janique and I we just continued to be like, laugh. Like we got to Sebastopol, California, and the guy's like, "You've outperformed every film in here except Hamnet, including Wicked and Zootopia." And we were just like, how is that happening? My other favorite really quick story is going to, I was pretty ragged. I mean, I think I counted that I was maybe made 80 stops in 2025. The traveling was rough, and Janique too. And we would sometimes be deployed in 3 to 4 places in one day, where we'd have some of our librarians maybe even on here. They were amazing collaborators, and they would just it was like an army. We were like, "You guys stay in Texas. I got to go over to Europe. Janique, you go down to the Heartland. And one of the times, the one time I said, do I really have to go and be there? Does it make a big difference if I show up? And it was Del, um, in Del Rey, Florida. And I almost canceled. And I went, and this theater owner had 5 screens, and he was like, "We've got a situation. You should have been here for the intro." He was angry that I wasn't there for the intro. It was like the one time I didn't do that, but we had sent a message, and he's like, "We've got 500 and some people in theater one, and it's sold out, and there was an overflow of 150 more." And I was like, it was like a 3 o'clock on a sunny Sunday in Florida, in Delray, Florida. I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, they're just all, they're all, I said, well, he said, we put them in theater one. I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, we only sold 5 tickets to Nuremberg. It was down in theater one. So I just gave those people their money back with an extra ticket. And I put all the 150 spillover into one. So we've got a stagger. But that's the kind of stuff that you just don't, I've just never seen that. So anyway, I think
I'm gonna chime in on this on a couple things. So like, look, it's an amazing film. That's like part of the secret sauce here. It's also hitting a moment. But I think one of the things that I just want to key on what Kim was saying and what we kind of like always try to preach is eventizing. Go after eventize first. And because that's then you can create excitement, you can bring in, make special attributes like the filmmakers being at the screenings, but also the librarians. And that's
yes.
what helps motivate people to get to these events, and also the chance that they might be able to discuss something afterwards. And then that's what, to me, helps create that
Yes.
groundswell and contributes to the overflow into then I think we ended up with 47-week long runs or longer
Yeah.
run
I think
after.
too, in the beginning, beyond eventizing just the screening alone, one of the things that we worked really hard to get was a very specific opening weekend with Film
Mhm,
Forum,
mhm.
so that we coincided with Banned Books Week.
Right.
It's like knowing and celebrating the power of the librarians. Shout out to any librarians who are with us, but they really, really helped get the word out about screenings. And Jess Mills, Wee Marketing, who we've been working with on the organic social media throughout, but opening during Banned Books Week, that's already an eventized week across the
Right.
country. And we started at Film Forum, and there was a point, Kim was saying 3 to 4 screenings where we were all deployed. But during Banned Books Week, I think we were in 38 theaters at once during that
Mhm.
week alone. And that I think really motivated public libraries, librarians, and others, even without us in some locations, to eventize, because people wanted to be able to do something topical in that week. So that was a really strong kind of out the gate start to the theatrical release. And then
Right.
also trusting in our librarians and film participants. We're lucky that there's so many people involved in the film that in a number of places we were able to have them there for panel discussions, whether that was with Kim, with me, with Maria, with Jana, with our executive producers on the ground. But we really showed up as much as possible. And then subsequent screenings, they were able to kind of take the reins themselves and lead Q&As as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that along with the Field of Dreams, there was always this fantasy that we could go across the country and actually have town halls where people would just show up because they cared about this and get involved. And when I say that it was town hall like, we saw change in the room every single time. It was like people, what I started to adapt, if it's as a tip, is I started to, whoever the moderator, sometimes it would be the theater person, sometimes we had a more curated situation, I would advise them to not ask me as many questions about how did the movie get made, and because it was so important, the impact in a room, that I was like, I want to get right to the interactive part with the audience. So I started to shift that instead of if you had a half an hour, just give me a kickoff question and then I want to turn it over. And what would happen is I usually would prompt and say something, unless you think this is just happening in Texas and Florida. And I was able to say, we have now been in 30 states and there is not one place where there haven't been people who've said this is happening. And then you would be in Berkeley or you'd be in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and you'd have a librarian or someone stand up and say, it's happening right here over in blah, blah, blah school. It became hyper local. And then someone would stand up and say, come see me after. There's a school board meeting. You've got to come, all of you, next Tuesday. Come out here. We've got a table. And we really did see almost like Quaker style meetings of people revealing things, having, it was, a lot of choir. I don't think there was a lot of, I wondered if there would be protesters. We didn't see a lot of that. But that part of it, and the other part, I was going to say, the other part of the dream was that in researching McCarthyism, I really asked myself, what pulled us back from going over the precipice? And it was because they went a bridge too far, McCarthy, with attacking something so sacrosanct. And I really, till this moment, we've started this thing that I'm calling Librarians Without Borders. But the symbolism of the librarian was something I wanted to elevate in every community, to say, are we really living in a country where we're looking at arresting our librarians? By having our librarians be able to come with us, they literally, I mean, again, good, happy, proud of the film, but the standing ovations were often for the librarians. And when they came out, it was like, I haven't experienced that since COVID with the health workers. There was a time in Maine, in Waterville, Maine, where they had a entire parade from the public library over to the theater, where townspeople were clapping and cheering on the librarians like healthcare workers to save our democracy.
Wow.
So it's been just.
I'm just going to say one thing about this. Who says that political films don't have an audience in the United States? I think that's such bullshit that's been promoted by the streamers who won't buy political films, probably out of appeal to Trump. But I think they also are just generally scared of political films, or maybe they don't feel political films have an audience. But I would say, fuck them. There is an audience for political films in the United States, and we need it now more than ever.
Oh, so true, John. And I also would say, and I don't want to bash the media and the news, but I will disclose, and I don't think I'm alone, that since Trump won, I've had a real aversion to watching mainstream news. So that can work different ways. You can say people are kind of fatigued with politics and that would support not having them. But I think when it's long form, there may be a lot of people who don't want to be watching the mainstream news, but they're very eager to go see something that is more a deeper dive and contextualizing the moment we're living in.
I think people are also willing to be mobilized now. I mean, geez, especially after
That's what we saw a lot in the theaters, is that being able to have the in-person experience, I think, was so critical. That there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of kind of siloed attacks on librarians, or sorry if everyone's hearing the siren, challenges that are popping up from school district to school district, but being able to share that space, that time, that conversation together, and take the step from being enraged or terrified or upset about what was happening, and have the conversation about things that you can do, knowing from librarians locally what's happening specifically in your community. You see those kind of light bulb moments happening in the theater, and you also see neighbors finding people, like finding allies who they can continue to go to the school board meeting with, who they can go to their library board meeting with. And that was really inspiring to see, especially in places like rural Iowa or Kansas. We recently had a screening finally in Oklahoma, which was a state where I was like, why can't we get to Oklahoma? They need this.
One of the 3 left.
But it shows you that there's more people in these places than you expect who are open to this dialogue and like receptive to organizing and taking action around this issue.
And people, I think, in positions of distribution, like independent theater owners, who took cue from our librarians in the film, who are like, you know what, I'm just going to take risks here and speak out. So we learned about small red state theater owners who said, you know, this may have pushback in my town, but I don't care. I need to do it. I kind of heard that I was on a list at some point in Texas, and there was someone who saw the film in a position of power. I'm not going to say what, who said, I was told not to support this film, but I don't care. I'm going to. So that was, you know, it's just like it inspired courage because our brave librarians and those in the film set that example. The other thing that's really surprising, I just will say in terms of demographic, another big surprise was that I did not know that this would appeal to youth. And even yesterday, I did a screening with 250 teenagers from 8th to 12th grade and was shocked that, you know, when same thing, people say no political films, people say teenagers won't watch documentaries. Bullshit. They were all riveted, vocal, laughing, crying. It's shameful, shameful. They were so engaged. So that's like a new demo of late that I'm like, oh my God, we can actually hit young people. They get it.
Right.
Those are the sort of niche. There's just so many niche audiences that we're learning that I didn't even think about.
Yeah.
You know,
So I want to like get into a little bit more of the mechanics. I mean, I've seen that in the chat a bit, like in, you know, obviously the audience, you know, there are certain films where it strikes a chord with an audience and that's helpful, but that belies that there's a lot of groundwork that's laid for that and a lot of, you know, tactics that's used for that can be used by can be used by any filmmaker. You may not have the same results, but it will help you get to those results. So the first thing I want to talk about is your outreach and your impact team, and that you had a lot of partnerships with organizations. And can you talk a little bit about, especially when you started those partnership discussions in relationship to the production of the film? Because I think a lot of filmmakers don't start those early enough, and I think you guys started those pretty early. Can you speak to those?
Well, I'll let Janique chime in here, but I just want to sort of start by giving a huge shout out to this little team sitting here as we speak, because we have become, I mean, there's always that decision of bringing on like a big impact firm with bells and whistles, and we interviewed a lot, but we've done a lot ourselves, and it's hard work, and, you know, it's a choice that filmmakers make of whether to try to raise money and, you know, but I can say for myself, I couldn't let go of it because one, I felt like we knew it together. We had established the trust with our librarians. That's the other thing. We're super lucky. You know, we're with these crazy, smart, motivated advocates in our film who have been tremendous in collaborating on the impact. But my team has just like been so entrepreneurial and hardworking, and it's a lot of work. As we all know, it's a lot of work. But I will say that for me, I've never had anything. The reason I keep doing it is because the reward I'm getting it is so high when I go. Every time I say I can't travel, I can't go, it fortifies me because in terms of mental health, I just feel like there's so many people who feel so hopeless, and I do many days about what's happening in the country, but I've got something, you know, I can get up and say, I can walk into a room and actually feel agency myself. And this issue is so hyper local, unlike the gun issue, which has been frustrating in the past for me. You can actually tell people you can affect this in your own town. And it's
Mhm.
true. And so there's a feeling of getting people riled up without being too Pollyanna while accepting that we're in shit. And so I do it for self-serving reasons too.
Right, right. But you had, just to be clear, like Janique, do you want to talk about some of the partnerships that
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. So very early on in like our early development filming in that first trip when we went to Texas in the beginning of 2022, after connecting with the freedom fighters in 2021, when the Krause list was released, Carolyn, Becky, Nancy Joe, and that core group who we met with, they were signing on to this like warning letter to Granbury, where a bunch of books had been removed, and they were co-signing with ACLU Texas. So right in the beginning, there was already one of who are now impact partners alongside us, ACLU Texas, and we didn't embed with the ACLU. We knew we wanted to keep our focus on folks on the ground, the librarians and the parents and students who were flanking them in this fight, but they became just an amazing resource for information. We were able to meet with the people who were leading that team, and just kind of brainstorm, talk, get background. They would share articles and other things, and just, yeah, really there as an amazing resource and partner as we were in production. Penn America, similarly, who we work really closely with in this phase of the release, they provided, we knew about their work with book banning already because they have tons of data. They put out a report about which books have been banned, showing the escalation of this unprecedented volume that we're experiencing now. So naturally, we were looking at them as a resource for data and information, but the team there, Jonathan Friedman and others, were just really open to conversations with us early on and understood the vision that our team had for this to be something that was the personal story of the librarians and that personal story on the ground, but in release could create and spark these really timely conversations about the issue. So we continue to work with them now, but those were partnerships that started during production. And that network has only grown since, including Penguin Random House, Authors Against Book Bans, and others, in order to eventize all of these screenings. That's been priceless to be able to work alongside these different groups. And it also gives us the opportunity to put tools and resources into the hands of everybody who's attending, who wants to do something when they leave the theater.
And the other thing that happened is when we'd go to regional cities like DC or Seattle, we were picking up other prominent advocate librarians who became part of the posse, and organizations like Let Utah Read or Freedom to Read in Florida.
Yep, Read Freely Alabama.
Yeah,
Every
so we
library.
started growing the regional partnerships as well.
Right, right.
And I'll just say about Penn America, that was unusual because I have done a lot of work around my films in the impact space. And a lot of times those not-for-profits don't really get it. Like they don't get how the film, like not that it's competitive, but it can be like they don't really understand the opportunity or the power. But Jonathan, he's also like a film maven guy. He totally got it from very early on and understood how this partnership could work. And that hasn't always been the case with, with other natural advocacy partnerships around an issue, but it was with Penn.
The other thing that those partnerships really helped with, and I also shout out to the American Library Association, American Association of School Librarians, and all those state chapters, social media, like I've seen in the chat, people asking what's transferable. Social media and our organic reach was grown in large part thanks to librarians and library workers being super circulators and information spreaders, but also our impact partners collaborating with us on different initiatives, different screenings, and helping us spread the word about the release state by state. So I think that made a huge difference in the audience that we were able to tap into online. And we heard again and again and again at theaters, like, how did you hear about it? Your social media. What brought you here? Why did you drive 4 hours? I saw a post on Instagram and I said, I have to see this in the theater. So social media was really a huge piece of this.
And also, again, shout out to my scrappy team here in that they were really smart early on. I mean, I kind of was a bit hands off with this, but Caitlin sitting here and Janique, after we saw the promise of the ALA, the American Librarian Association, in June, we started to understand, I called it the,
I back up to April and the Texas Library Association.
That's right. The Texas, yeah. But, I hate calling it a Ponzi scheme, but it was like a pyramid thing where we understood that every state in the union has a conference of all their librarians, and then they could go back to their rural places and tell those people. So there was this huge network through the conferences.
The conferences were important spaces too, from an impact perspective. To like it was very different experiencing the film just from our side in a room that was all librarians, and the conversation that could be had there was different, and different leaders emerged, like in Missouri, and there was someone who then joined in at the theatrical screening there. But because the issue is so dynamic from state to state and district to district, there's libraries that couldn't sponsor a screening, or librarians who wouldn't feel comfortable participating in a panel. So being able to share it in those spaces, and I think for any film, like honoring your niche audience and your superheroes, and being able to work with them as you build your release is just so important.
Yeah, and I'm just going to just back up slightly in terms of identifying audience. And I still, many filmmakers I still talk to, it's like, well, I want to reach the broadest audience possible. It's like, it's not, it's not just the core or the choir. And it's like, you start with the core of the choir. You start, to me, because you have limited resources, you start with a niche audience or one or two niche audiences, and you develop those audiences, and you hope, in this case was a great super example, that they're going to spread it to other people. So which also brings me to the next. So we have impact and outreach being significant, organic social being significant. And like most of our releases are impact oriented, and we kind of call it an event oriented. So we kind of call what we do impact event theatrical, which the Librarians is, a great example of. But then also influencers, more and more are like equally important.
Do you want a treat?
They operate on, on their own, on social media, but they're also like spreaders unto themselves. So you guys had a variety, like you've already spoken about, and you can speak again about the librarians themselves being influencers. But can you talk a little bit about different influencers that you've had involved with the campaign?
Well, we were lucky enough early on. We had Sarah Jessica Parker as an early executive producer. And I'll say that I'm not necessarily a proponent. I've never sort of ever, I haven't had a celeb EP, and I've never attached one for the sake of celebrity, but she was very organic. She had been speaking about libraries, a proponent of PBS, at a time when the funding was being threatened.
Always seen carrying a book.
Yes.
Avid reader.
And so that was, of course, very helpful, but not like the engine by any means. Just like always, like even at Sundance, just part of the posse. And even now, it feels a little exponential. Like we haven't even really tapped into that potential because there are so many people that care about this, but we've been in correspondence with Dua Lipa about helping, and like all kinds of people who care and have book clubs. So we feel like we're almost like, we're exhausted, but we're almost like with the broadcast taking off and it just starting to really get out there to, hope millions of people, I think.
Yeah. And we've been lucky to be able to collaborate with different authors
Yes.
along the way. George M. Johnson, whose book All Boys Aren't Blue is referenced in the film, and they were able to join us at Sundance. We were grateful to receive Subject Matters Impact Grant. So that's where like Impact Campaign was something we were thinking about along the way, but really did start at Sundance with that Subject Matter Grant. And George came and did a panel and attended a screening and did Q&A alongside us, and has since participated in other panel discussions. Nicole Hannah-Jones, whose book is referenced in the film as well, did a Q&A with us, but being able to...
Peter Parnell, who did Tango Makes Three, like...
At Film Forum for the
Yeah.
opening, we had Peter there.
We had so many people willing to... And the other thing I just, John, is that, part of the perfect storm was we have a large group of EPs, and they have been involved as a committee, if you will, in so many aspects beyond just unbelievable, generous support. They are just so much part of our tribe, and we could never have done this without their like being sort of really involved every step of the way and understanding the importance of this, of getting this out, and being there when we needed help to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I want to address that later, because there have been questions of how much did this cost and how did you guys raise the money for it? But just going down the line is other things that were helpful. So I would say like paid media or like paid social ads, and which I think can you talk a little bit about like how much you spend per market and like what, how those were helpful in addition to boosting the organic
with the
social
trailer.
ads?
Yeah.
It's sort of organic.
Yeah, with the trailer, we'll never stop talking about the trailer. It went viral when
That
it
was
was
crazy.
released right before the theatrical opening. We now have, I think, 2.65 million impressions on the trailer, but in that first week, the numbers were like, and we were off to 1 million. We're like, oh wow, we can do this all organic. Probably not the smartest plan for ticket sales. So we did enlist Matt Delman's team, Third Impression, specifically to handle the paid ads for theatrical. And what we did was we looked at it as like the major markets, or more like urban centers that were harder to tap into audience members and getting butts in seats, and we put kind of focused more money in those, like Chicago, Houston, Dallas, San Francisco. And then the other thing we did was watched closely how the tickets were selling so that we could adapt along the way. So we had said, okay, maybe we'll put $1,000 to $3,000 into a major market, but if the seats sell out 5 weeks in advance, like they did in Houston and San Francisco and some of those other theaters, we were actually able to save and move that money to another market. And then for smaller regional markets that we identified, either because they were important to us based on like film participants being there, or they were states that we knew were really under fire, and we felt strongly that we wanted this conversation and this presence there. We were more conservative with like $350 to $750 on paid ads. I'd say that Film Forum and the New York City release, it started with 2 weeks. Like Kim said, we actually got held over for 5 weeks. So that was one where we did continue each week to spend on paid ads that Film Forum was running and that the Librarians film was running. So we did invest there, but I'd say the biggest tip was like, it doesn't, your strategy doesn't end just with identifying the amount of money and the market. It was being really responsive to saving where we could, investing in moving that budget to other markets because we were selling out so quickly, which
Right.
was a great problem to have.
Right. The one thing we haven't talked about yet is press and, quote unquote, earned media, and kind of curious as to what you guys in relationship to the other things, how, because I think you got a New York Times review, I think New York Times critics pick. If I remember correctly, it's been a few months.
Yes, you are
Yes.
remembering correctly.
Yes. Plus, gobs, there's still press coming in, so, but how much do you feel like that pushed the needle compared to impact and organic social and, the local librarian influencers and the paid social? Just kind of curious, like where you feel that fits in the mix.
I think a lot. I don't know if I had to pick, like the social media has been like our team's done just a kick-ass job on that. But we got good press coming out of Sundance, and then you get that bite at the apple. And then, I think there's so much regional press that we didn't have to, that just came, on its own.
Mhm.
And that's now a second wave of that with all of the PBS, um, all the broadcast markets. And, we are doing this thing, which was a choice, but the Indie Lens pop-up, where,
Mhm.
that's a whole other conversation about our educational component, where we're working with Roco, with educational, but, we just have worked with really good people. Dogwolf, I think they're among the best. So internationally, we're doing even educational stuff a lot there, a lot of non-theatrical. And we had a whole UK theatrical there. But the press, that spawned a lot of press, like The Guardian. Like we got really almost as good press in the UK as we did here because it went on the BBC before PBS,
Before Film Forum. We did
before the
BBC,
theatrical.
Storyville, and
Yeah.
Film Forum. The start of our broadcast distribution in
So
UK was timed with the theatrical release here.
And I don't know that we could have credit for planning this, but it worked out well in that there was a continuous role of press. Like it
Mhm.
kind of, there was the Sundance moment, and then, there's this, and then we were revving up toward the September theatrical, but we had
Mhm.
this Europe piece, and then it kind of from September till now, and now we got another. But we've had, we had the Today Show, we had some major ABC News. I just did MSNBC at 4 a.m. the other day, but way too early. And
I feel like radio was always
oh yeah, a lot of
if we look at
NPR.
theatrical specifically, I feel like the radio was really impactful. We did NPR, we did all of it on WNYC. We had Texas at 2 hits on Texas NPR. We did Bay Area NPR and a number of different regions, but that was one where I would hear a lot of times people in theaters or just get random text messages, like somebody in Idaho saying that they heard the NPR piece that they did in the Bay Area. Like that seemed to be something that really resonated. And I think it all is very much an intertwined ecosystem. Like you can't do as well on social media without any press. You can't get as much press
True.
without doing as well in theatrical or being committed in the impact and community screenings that we were doing. They all really, you have to be out to have something to talk about
and do the work. I mean, just this morning I got a op-ed in the Hill that we wrote. So there's also the topic. On one hand, it's tricky because you're competing on, how much of it is political kind of press. You're competing with, any number of things that we know are happening in the world. But on the other hand, censorship is, something that is evergreen, sadly, right now in these months. It's not going away.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And all of our film participants, I've been working incredibly hard and very courageous and continuing to speak up. Like since sharing their stories in the documentary. They've really worked alongside us. And it's amazing to have kind of this cohort to be able to deploy different people for different opportunities in the press. And so it's been fun working with all of our librarians, but I'd say they've been really brave and generous with how engaged they've been throughout.
So one of the audience questions, and so we're going to do audience questions through the chat, and then it's put into a sheet that I see, and then I'm going to ask the audience questions. But something that's come up a lot is you guys are doing a lot. So how did you kind of like, I don't know how much you want. I mean, I know budgets are sensitive, but how much you want to talk about the budget, and then also how you raised money to do this and to do this campaign.
Yeah. Well, in brief, we started the project, as we said, back in the fall of 21, and we delivered it like days before Sundance. It was one of those back in January of 25. So the money was put together with, I'd say, what percentage that was what percentage was equity? Small.
But did you guys earmark money for distribution during production, or was that a raise that you guys did afterwards? You know, it's something that I always preach is to budget for distribution, during production.
Well, there's the aspirational budgets, you're always sort of, just trying to keep afloat. But the actual production budget was maybe 80, 80 to 85% grants and private donor 501c3 fiscal sponsor things. And then how much ITVS was maybe a fifth of the budget. And then the rest was a small percentage, maybe 15% was equity, I want to say.
And it was really a continual process that each kind of step in the filming, in production and through post-production and continuing in impact, that it was a continual process of fundraising.
And I'll say, just transparently, the stress of learning what was happening with PBS and CPB and all that, they honored their commitments and, we're just at the tail end here, but we delivered it. And then I think that next budget starting after Sundance last year is where it gets tricky. We're definitely, I don't want to tell a bunch of filmmakers how martyred it can be. But suffice it to say, we are in way deep into sweat equity here.
Action goes a long way.
Yeah, but that's a different sort of conversation about our sustainability. And the other elephant in the room, of course, is not just the distribution, the fact that we were putting out money to fly me all over the place, not get honorariums, have to pay for the planes and the hotels and all that. And we've done so many of them, but I do think it, I'm feeling like it was not a fool's errand. And I was going to say something about the, we continue to be trying to raise money around impact, but it's the story that all of us hit every time, which is the impact. Well, I was going to say the elephant in the room is it's not the distribution was like getting the money for theatrical was sort of like that was primary, but then you do look at this awards thing and what you want to commit to spending on publicists, and we all know what that is, and if you're sort of going for it with award season. But it's something that that I do feel strongly that it's okay to talk about, which is in this time right now in the country, I don't want to say I resent, it's just I feel like so many of my colleagues feel like we're all in something together, and the responsibility of putting out certain kinds of nonfiction storytelling in a precarious time is important, and we should be able to focus on doing that. That's like the primary thing. But you of course do want and then when you're an ITVS, a PBS title, you don't have any marketing budget. as you know, for awards. So that's up to you to do. And I just wish that there wasn't such pressure in the whole awards thing to divert resources, both in terms of time, energy, and dollars to that. But it's a necessary evil because you do get attention, and it's like, so having said all that, we were prudent about that. I mean, in certain ways, but it is what it is. You don't really want to go with a film doing as well as it's done without bringing in publicists, and we worked with good ones, and we're not unhappy about anything. You know, at the end of the day, I feel this has just been such a win in terms of impact, in terms of everything but you know, you don't get to have everything like you said about this, but you don't get, I think it's rare that you get all those things in one.
Right.
You know,
and that we still like watching the movie the whole way through.
yeah, we're just sort of, yeah, that's a wild thing.
So this is a pre-audience question, which is, do you guys have a hard out at 10:30 Pacific, or I think that's 1:30 Eastern? Do you guys have a hard out? Because I don't mind going a little longer because we
It's
still
fine
have,
as long as we're not boring people.
no, I mean, some people are dropped off because but we still have 170 people on this.
Ooh,
So,
good.
you know, and I think we were up to 200 or over 200 at some point.
We
But,
love the questions. We're
yes.
happy to share. It's actually exciting to process this because we haven't had like breath. We've just been running.
Yeah, yeah. So can you talk about like maybe what didn't work? This is from Ty Bradford asked what didn't work on the marketing front? Like a lot of things did work, but do you find that there were things that you guys tried that didn't work?
This is a hyper specific example, but I know on your list beforehand, John, you wanted us to bring up Film Trade, which is an alternative distribution, a form of TVOD that we've been excited to kind of be one of the early films working with their company. And what it is essentially think of it like a gift card that is a movie on it. So we can put the movie file on there and then put BTS or Q&A and other things. And you can customize the window of availability and how many views or how long somebody can watch it for. And with community screenings, we saw this pre-broadcast window. So pre-February 9th, Monday, when we came out on PBS, being this exclusive, unique window. And that's how the theatrical has worked before broadcast. That's how a lot of our community screenings worked. And with Film Trade, I thought it would be the same, that you would want to make that card something where people could watch it before broadcast. And it was interesting because that logic didn't apply to that method of distribution. I think people wanted it to just kind of open-ended be available, but that was one thing where I felt like, no, this is the way to do it. People want to screen the film before the broadcast, and that's why they'll buy the Film Trade card. And I said to Mike, who's the founder of the company, I said, you were right. It should be it should be available for longer, and people will still be excited to buy it and share it. We had people at a community screening in Jackson, Wyoming that we just did, and one person, I think she bought 5 and she was mailing some to family in Florida. So the timing of this exclusive window wasn't important to her. She just wanted to be able to mail this to her family in Florida and have them watch the movie that way. So that was an interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like it's less about certain things that didn't work and more about exponential opportunities that we don't have necessarily the bandwidth to in terms of our team. You know, how many Caitlin inquiries or what we've had over 2,000 inquiries, like
direct outreach to us, and that's separate from people who are going to Cindy and John and to Rocco and
or to Dog Wolf.
It's to our other partners.
Yeah, it's a very it's a lot. And, and then we've tried some things with merch. That's been kind of fun. And I think we could do more if we had more to dedicate to thinking about it and doing more with it. It's more that it feels like there's exponential opportunities that we're not sure how to fulfill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think because like merch is one thing that maybe could have started earlier and been during the theatrical, but just looking back on it, you guys were so there was so much going on, with the
Yeah.
theatrical and the awards campaign and just you guys deciding to run the impact with Caitlin, who was amazing. Like just there was so much. And the one thing I want to speak to is that this eventized theatrical is not for the faint of heart. It's a lot of coordination and work. And here's shout out to your team, but also Cindy on my team and also Grace on my team. It's just and Nick on my team. It's a lot to make these things come together. So they're
And Jess for always
and
getting
just for yeah, we should actually just
information
some
out
people have
there
asked about
because,
the
yeah,
shout out to the
panels.
team. So Jess from Wee Wee Marketing, and then also Sunshine Sachs was the producer, just because I know it's in the chat, but just to have it on the video as far as some of the other team members on this. And
Yeah,
so
and each one of those things is bespoke, and they don't know that you have to. I mean, we have a joke here. It's like, oh, another wedding. I mean, it's like, and Victor over there just orchestrating, every time that, it's like looking at menus and
Yeah.
the
But I'll say
travel.
that but I do feel like it's so rewarding to do this kind of in person. And I guess that leads me to a next question is like this thing that we embrace, which also kind of drives my booker Cindy crazy, these long theatricals, which to be honest, yours ended, like you had the film forum in October and then you had the broadcast February. And that kind of like that became a bookend of the theatrical because it's also available on YouTube now. But this probably could have gone on for 2 more months, maybe even 8 more months. Um, but, can you talk about like how just kind of like to refresh with filmmakers, that you can do these long, and you guys had festivals for like
Yeah.
10 months before the theatrical. Like you're basically in a
And still.
14-month event theatrical release and you are going on to community screenings. So even though the broadcast is you're probably going to have like a 2-year, 3-year event theatrical release. And just wondering if we've talked about it a little bit, but why that is so important in this day and age.
People, some of it has been counterintuitive. Like people don't seem to care. Like people still want to eventize it,
Mhm.
even though it's now free on YouTube in the
Right.
past weeks. So do I regret, like, had we known how well it was going to do on theatrical, would I have pushed my broadcast? Maybe, looking at things like No Other Land.
Mhm.
Maybe we just never would have, no one could have predicted
Right.
that we would have this kind of, but I think it is a testament not only that people want to see this kind of thing, but that they want to get together to do it, not on a device. But it's also that people, what's I going to say, that, it's just a really good tea leaves about the revival of art house cinemas and young people, people wanting to go back
Right.
to communal experience of a theater.
Yeah.
I think that's part of what this illustrates, this case study. But I do wonder, because we thought for a while I was getting pressure that we were having our broadcast way too late. We should have done it
Mhm.
earlier. I'm so thankful now.
Well, we even pushed it, we encourage you to push it a few weeks, because
Yeah.
originally it was in January or towards the end of January. And
Yeah.
yeah,
But, if I had to do it over, I don't know, maybe I would have said June or something. And,
yeah,
I'm very happy we released the other night and that the world's getting to see it. But like I said, it seems like, especially in the non-theatrical market, it's not in any with to Janique's point about the film trade card. There are certain things that defy what you might think. And
right.
people still want this bespoke, eventized kinds of stuff. We get inquiries every single day.
Yeah. And then I might just cap on that is that people want to be in community. I mean, technology is dividing and isolating and siloing everyone, and people are sick of it. People want to come out in community, especially when there's something to talk, if it's a pressing issue. So, but I think people want to engage with things with other people. Like we're humans after all. It's like we want to go back to that campfire and sit around the campfire and engage in stories together with other people. And that's something that I hope never, that our tech
Also,
overlords never
we're,
find a way to eliminate.
I mean, the online part of PBS is new to me because I've done other films with sorry about the
Is it
sirens.
too loud?
The PBS Independent Lens. And I know they're trying to build a lot more of their app and their online presence. So we're, 48 hours out the gate. I don't know comparatively. I mean, I haven't even talked to their team about what this is comparatively, but we're happy that it seems to be escalating like the trailer. And in the beginning, it's like 1,000 people an hour and it just keeps growing. So we're well over, what is it right now? We're well over 40,000 hits on just the YouTube channel.
Right. Which is part of, and someone asked how that happened. That's what ITVS or Independent Lens PBS is now pushing is being on YouTube and having their broadcast also be available for free for everyone. So
and we also
for a limited window.
And I don't know if we'll have another opportunity to just say about the broadcast. I will tell you that I was frightened because one is paranoid about everything these days. One of the reasons I was so anxious and excited to get this into theaters was I wasn't confident that there would, as much as Lois kept saying, the season's going on and everything, like everything changes every week in this country right now. And I was nervous that not that it would, independent loans wouldn't, I knew that it was good for a season. I was scared that the carriage rate, what it's called, the carriage rate, that would be thwarted, because I thought, I don't care what anyone says. If you're an affiliate, we know a lot of people know how that works, that they have autonomy, all the affiliates. They're, they are offered to play that in the prime time slot of Independent Lens, but they're not obliged. And I thought all these affiliates who had their funding cut would be frightened for retribution, because I thought, well, Trump could just start messing with the FCC and take their licenses, which I still think can happen. But it's been amazing. None of them have backed down. And we're being told it's one of the highest carriage. It's in every state. I mean, it's so exciting. So it is available in the most important little small PBS stations that have all their funding cut. This in the last days has been playing, and we're getting responses from like all these places, from Alaska to Oklahoma. So it's so cool.
And it's been nice to hearing from our film participants that since it went live, this happened definitely during the theatrical, that they would get feedback like, oh, I saw the film, I'm going to do more, I'm going to show up, I'm going to do this, or just congratulations on all you've been doing. But since the PBS broadcast on Monday, I got other texts saying similarly that they're having people in their lives who see it in different places, and just continuing that commitment to fight for First Amendment rights.
And even before the escalation of fascism here, even before that, I had felt like years ago, this is the right film for public television. And I feel, but you wonder, did you make the right decision to take that, to partner? I couldn't be more happy about that right now, and more supportive of Independent Lens and how important it is, because I think a lot of people do forget the demo of that, that it, being free in rural America with, in a lot of communities with less, who don't have the means to be subscribing to, our streamers. It's just, it feels so right that this is, available in that way. and that there's still public television, at least for this moment.
Well,
We may be the last of an era, but I'm happy with that. And
yeah. So there's a question from Marilyn Ness, who, good friend, Marilyn, wonderful producer and director. How far in advance did you get into did you have to do to get into conferences? And then were you doing sneak peeks, or did the calendar align organically from your festival premiere? So, because conferences, yeah, and Marilyn's asking that because conferences are kind of tricky. They have super long lead times. Oftentimes they're before theatrical. So, like, are you going to screen the film at the conference, or can you just do like small pieces of the film? So, can you guys talk about your participation in conferences? Maybe start off with how far in advance were you planning to be in talking to conferences about being involved?
Yeah, we did hi Marilyn. We did the outreach to a lot of the state library association conferences right after Sundance. And we conferences do often like book everything and organize everything, sometimes 5 months, 6 months in advance. But I think with this specific film and for librarian community, I know that people often were rearranging the grid or moving things to different rooms to accommodate this. And we tried to give as much lead time as possible by starting after Sundance in those conversations. We also learned so much about other library groups and different conferences that were happening within the publishing community and others who reached out to us. But the Montana State Library Association and Texas were the first two that we did, and they had come to us, and we weren't sure exactly the strategy with those, like in a bigger picture way, but we were like, yes, let's do it, let's go.
Yeah, we could have waited like a year and said, no, let's traditionally just get our theatrical done and not do that stuff. I think the not challenge, but the bigger thing was just figuring out who's doing what, meaning we had signed on with an educational distributor of Rocco and kind of carving out certain things that we were doing as the film team. Right?
Yeah, I'd say we were very proactive on our side and starting a lot of those communications because we knew that those could lead to other opportunities with educational distribution. So we did a lot of proactive outreach on our side, and then we would bring Rocco or other partners into the conversation. And the conference, the state conferences were also interesting in that they led to some theatrical booking. So in Nebraska, for example, we did screenings at the Film Stream Theater in Omaha and another smaller independent theater about an hour outside where they were holding their conference. In Missouri, that happened as well, where the librarians were able to buy out one of the theatrical screenings. So we were able to find these different ways of weaving it in. Hot Springs Film Festival coincided with the Arkansas Library Association's annual conference. So they partnered and drove a bunch of librarians to the festival screening. So I'd say we were like really
everything everywhere all
quick on our feet to see where things fit in, but we knew it was important to us to be able to share it in those spaces.
And structurally part of the chaotic thing, but also I think unusual and a good way, was these concentric circles of theatrical educational campuses because, because of the subject of the film, you often had libraries and theaters talking to each other. And sometimes that got a little bit confusing and messy, where we would get inquiries from both ends, as you know, John, and it'd be like, well, I already talked to so-and-so, but we didn't know that the theater had talked. But it's natural that if you have a small play.
Well, one of the first things Cindy did was to go through every single inquiry, which I think was 1,000 at that point in time, and identify which cities had art house theaters and which ones she wanted to then take and book a theatrical, and then which ones could go to ROCO for community screenings and educational. Part of this, just in terms of strategy, is also you have three main aspects to event theatrical, as I refer to it. You have festivals, which usually take primacy, then you have theatrical, which is next up, and then you have community screenings and educational. And for instance, theaters are okay if it plays in a festival before it's playing in their theater, but they're not okay if it's playing in a library or a community screening or even a college nearby. So the timing and coordination of that is also something that, takes time. And it's also a matter of patience, being able to convince the people who have to wait for their screening in a community center that, why they have to wait. And,
And
but
then the
then,
conferences are their own, like to Marilyn's point, the timing
yeah,
of the conferences are different, obviously,
yeah.
than a public library screening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because those are part of the reason is because those can be considered private. So
Yeah.
they're private events, so they're not open to the public, which theaters are okay with. So it's also, which is one of the reasons why it's okay to do conferences, but also extraordinarily good to do conferences. Because that's a way you can directly connect with your audience and you can find
Yeah.
champions of your film in different cities who will help you, get the word out into
And
those
And
cities.
people could do panels af like it would, I think it also provided an opportunity for the librarian community to kind of organize around it. Like we had a theatrical booking in South Carolina that followed a private conference booking,
Right.
and it involved university librarians, the local public library foundation, but they were able to identify an indie art house theater in South Carolina, and then we brought that to Cindy, who then did that booking. So I think there really was a back and forth. That
Right.
one thing I love with Cindy, the first time that she went through that list, she was identifying, was it 15 miles? We did
Yeah.
where there were theaters within a 15-mile radius of where that inquiry had come from. And Kim touched on it earlier, but we saw time and time again that people were really motivated to travel to the theater. It was never, the 15 miles seemed to be something that really didn't matter to people
Right.
in the end, driving 2, 3, 4 hours to
Yeah.
see the
I think at
movie. And
some
that
point
was
she expanded it
staggering.
to maybe 30 miles because, 30 miles is generally a half hour or something like that, 30 or 50.
Yeah.
You guys had people coming from 300 miles away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the wonderful things about this whole configuration of, you and ROCO is the ability to take a project like this and make it, bespoke and case by case. For example, as opposed to working with a bigger distributor, like for example, the pricing of, like, we knew, I'll just be transparent here too. Like if the Los Angeles, I'll just give it as an example, theoretically, the Los Angeles Public Library contacted us, and they have a foundation. Sometimes there are foundations around these bigger city libraries. We knew they would probably have some money to either eventize this or give us something, or pass it over to ROCO. But what we did do was talk to ROCO about the time we were in, and that all the funding that got slashed from PBS was also the ISLM.
IMLS.
I always get it wrong. IMLS, the funding cuts to our libraries. And, we wanted to be helpful, but there's all this work we're doing, right? So ROCO said, normally when we license something, they don't have the ability, they're not, they don't have the right to do a fundraiser, right?
Mhm.
But we said with the small and rural libraries, what if we say they can to
Mhm.
raise money for their own sustenance because they've gotten all these government money. So I think people were willing to work with different models that accommodated what was practical and what was, or we could go to our funders and say, this is why we're doing this. Can you help in some way? Some of the grant money would help to enable us to do that.
Mhm.
So it's that, being able to really It takes all your focus for sure, but I really, with this project, am happy that we have so much control
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
those
You
things.
guys, I know we probably have to wrap it up at some point soon. One thing we haven't talked about is the virtual events that you guys did. So at the tail end of theatrical, can you guys talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we did two PVOD events or film drops, virtual screenings before the broadcast premiere while the theatrical was still going on. And the first one that we did was in early January. So theatrical had started in October, and it was a month before broadcast. And Jess actually was very helpful in sparking the idea of it being much more like a rally instead of looking at this as an opportunity to just do another straightforward QA. So we had way more people involved than anyone would recommend putting on the panel, or maybe than Kinema was braced for. But I think we had 9 different people enlisted, from film participants to advocacy leaders, grassroots organizers,
With
from
call to
different
action.
states, and really strong call to action around hyper-local civic engagement. Kim was woven in throughout the conversation and kind of leading the rally, and we had different sections. So it was fun to do that and try to do it differently than your normal panel discussion. We had a week and a half of runtime promoting it, and just went really heavy on social. I think we put $300 total into boosting that on Meta, our newsletter, which has been an amazing resource that we've been building subscribers on throughout since Sundance and on. But we ended up with over 1,000 people signing up for that event. We had all 50 states represented in that one. And one of the exciting things for me in moderating the chat was just people were so hungry for next steps, for tools, for resources, for information, and for ways to get involved, so we could really see in real time while they were watching it and while the discussion was going on, like, people here want to do something. They saw it and they want to do something, and that was really cool.
And from my sort of old school perspective, my team totally lifted this without me, Jess and Janique and Caitlin and Victor. And from my perspective, I mean, yes, there was an enormous impact, but there's also this, like, is there anything with merch and these things that can help sustain, our overhead, what we're doing? And it was $15 a ticket. So we grossed over $15,000, and I think it was 20% goes to Kinema. And from my perspective, it's like, how many times have I asked someone to throw a cocktail, and there's all of this liquor and food and all this stuff, and unless you like charge people up front, sometimes it's just like, wow, that was cool, but it takes a lot sometimes to raise 15 grand even at a small gathering. So I was like, wow, that just happened here in the loft in an hour and a half, and they came, and it's very exciting for older people like me to be like, oh, they can just go online and do this stuff.
Yeah. And so that one I'd say was a much bigger coordination effort. And that was the first one. And we did a second one in the weekend right before broadcast. And in that one, I think it was around 300 to 250 or 300. So it wasn't that kind of wild 1,000 plus participants, but it was at least a movie theater full of people. And for that one, I think it was folks who were really motivated because we had a special
it was a very
lineup for that.
It was a specific thing about the Supreme Court. It was a very specific thing about that. And the last thing I'll say about those things is that where the press kind of intersects is that I had been asked to do a podcast with Joyce Vance, who I didn't know who she was exactly, but she gets a lot of followers and in that political space. And she was so excited. She didn't show the film, but all these people from that podcast said, Joyce, can you do a designated virtual screening just for us? And so, you know, there again, it'll be interesting because we are planning something now with her that is, you know, but just special for her group. And I do think that people will still show up even though they can go to
Yeah,
YouTube.
I think people
Yeah.
like having the conversation
Yeah, exactly.
attached to the screening. It's not just
Yeah.
about watching the movie. And
Yeah.
I think it like really all comes back to also, it's like at all phases of production, but especially in the release, trusting, honoring, paying attention to, celebrating your niche audience is so important. Like if there's anything that translates to any movie that's being made, that's like one of the standout things to me from all of this.
And I was just going to say the satellite like niche things that I didn't expect was showing it to the publishers conference, like major, like all the publishers. And impact wise, you've got Skip Dye, who's like head of Penguin Random House, saying we love this film, and telling all of the editors and agents, you know, just hundreds and hundreds, saying you guys are now in the food chain. Like if you start caving to the chilling effect and saying, oh, this book about, you know, this gay kid isn't going to sell in Kansas, it won't ever get to the librarians. So it's like we had that reach. Then we had a whole thing with like film commissioners from around the world. Then we had a whole thing of like every illustrious library in like Stockholm, like all saying we need to play this here. So the international is not for now, but I can tell you that Zurich, Rome, that, and I do have to say that the most moving thing to us was in June when our Librarian of Congress was fired overnight. When the German National Library contacted us the next day and said, we have hundreds of German librarians. And Martha and I went and stood with the German librarians at the 33 book burning and then showed it to hundreds of Germans. And now we had another one, and now they've invited us back to Leipzig. And that is just like, that's the priceless part, is that they are all saying when America sneezes, we catch cold. This is happening here. It's happening in Italy. It's happening in the UK. And we, you know, that demand is now elsewhere in the world.
So just to think about starting to wrap it up, what is there anything you guys would do differently next time? Or if you had to do it all over again, like things that you might have done differently, besides maybe starting merch earlier.
You always think, gosh, I wish I could have done more long-term strategic planning sooner, but it's sooner than I've done other films. And you're just sort of, I don't know how to solve that. You always feel like, I mean, it's a good problem to have, but I always feel like it's like, oh, the new restaurant opened and like there's only one waitress and they're lined up and we're not like set up for shop. You know, just in terms of infrastructure. And, you know, that would be the area is like,
it's hard though, because every time we had that conversation often, like
it's a money
month
thing
by month, but then there's also like all the things that were going right or that were happening or that we were really excited about, but there was a constant kind of trade-off of like, you can't be perfect at everything or do each thing exactly how you would want it to be,
having more of a
so much at once
and having more of a war chest early on. I would say putting more focus, investing in the fundraising itself, because right now it is not a fool's errand. We know that investing in this for impact really will make a difference. And it's just a matter of, you know, without it, you miss opportunities basically.
Yeah. And trusting that with the fundraising element, the theatrical, I think Jon mentioned it earlier, but like with the theatrical appearances, there's not honorariums the way there would be maybe at a conference or other kind of appearance. So that really is all on the film team to get there, to show up, to do that engagement. And we didn't foresee this big of a scope. So as it kept going and continuing to show up, that was something that.
And on the bright side, in terms of how much I believe in the ability in 26 for this, you know, not to sound pitchy, but the ability of this film to actually flip school boards and move toward midterms is something I can't like just be like, oh, well, we might have done that. Like I see what happens in these places, and I'm not willing to, you know, as a citizen right now, just I see like I could do something, you know. And to that end, I do think there are more and more people, wonderful people in our space who are a little disillusioned and just putting money into you know, campaigns, political campaigns that see the and we have to continue to tell those folks about why these films and this kind of work is, you know, an incredibly useful investment of that kind of funding.
Okay. Cool. On that note, I want to thank you guys so much, you know, for again making such a great film and being so intrepid in terms of getting it out into the world and having it make an impact in the world. I think that's really something special these days. And I encourage, you know, although, you know, there are many filmmakers doing this, but you guys did it tremendously. So hats off to you. And thank you for coming and being so open and sharing your experiences with us. Yeah. Then,
Well, thank you. It wouldn't have happened without you, John.
aw.
Yes,
It's true.
thank you.
It's just true.
And yeah, so everyone else who's still here, we're going to be doing, hopefully these will be monthly, not just case studies, but different webinars that we're doing throughout the year.
And
So hopefully you'll
And
stay
shout out
tuned.
to all our producing team who couldn't
Yes.
be with us. Maria, Jana, traveling, and like essential, critical spokes in this whole thing. And they're every step of the way. And
Yeah.
our EPs.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you guys. Talk
Thanks a
soon.
lot.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.